welcome to the Webcast for Wednesday, July 30th. I'm South Ops meteorologist Jonathan O'Brien. The marine layer is present but fairly shallow this morning, about 1,000 feet deep, and any low clouds will burn off through the mid to late morning hours. Otherwise, the main thing to see this morning is some cloudiness and even a couple of lightning strikes ongoing across portions of the Sierra as an upper-level disturbance works its way across central and northern California. We didn't have any lightning in our geographic area for the calendar day yesterday, but that changed in a big way last night with a round of nocturnal thunderstorms that occurred after midnight over the northern portions of our area. This is a preliminary look at lightning totals for the past 24 hours as of about 8 a.m. this morning. Most of what you see way up across the North Ops area occurred yesterday afternoon. However, the big southernmost cluster there is all from last night and pre-dawn this morning, and it's a healthy number of strikes, at least several dozen to possibly a couple hundred. For the South Ops area, it was really the Stanislaus National Forest where these seem to be concentrated. It doesn't look like they made it as far south as Yosemite. There was a little bit of rain recorded with these storms, although not a whole lot from what the initial rain gauge reports are showing. The relatively cool temperatures and the recent cool and moist weather may have limited the ignition efficiency of these strikes, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if there's a couple of new ignitions out there this morning over the Stanislaus. We're not done with lightning for today either. There's likely to be somewhat of a lull in activity later this morning, but as we head into this afternoon, another round of isolated to scattered showers and thunderstorms will develop in much the same areas, across the Sierra and northern deserts, and particularly across Mono and eastern Tuolumne counties. It does look like we'll see some moisture with these as well, but they'll likely be fairly quick moving, and as a result, we could see a couple more ignitions from this next round of activity later today. The excitement mostly ends there, though, and for the vast majority of our geographic area that is not dealing with lightning, there's really not much to say as we transition into a very typical summer pattern for at least the next several days. Here's a look at today's forecast highs. Upper 80s and 90s will be the rule for the valleys. As we go through the next several days, California will be primarily in between troughing influences to our northwest and a pretty strong area of high pressure over the desert southwest. This in-between type pattern will balance out to very typical summer conditions with not a lot of change through early next week. Temperatures will remain near normal with generally a slow warming trend through Sunday as the ridge strengthens, then a few degrees of cooling by Sunday or Monday as a reinforcing trough fights back against it. Here's a look at the forecast highs by Sunday, which will be about the warmest day in most areas, but generally only about 2 to 5 degrees warmer than today, before we reset with a few degrees of cooling on Monday or Tuesday. Maybe the bigger story will be the increasingly dry conditions across the region. One thing about this pattern is that while it's not excessively hot, it does keep monsoonal moisture at bay. That means that after today, we won't have any lightning to worry about, at least for the next several days, but it's also going to get quite dry across the area and start trending us back to higher background fire danger conditions. Minimum humidity will be mainly between 12 and 25% above and inland from what will be a fairly shallow but persistent marine layer influence through early next week, and it'll generally favor the lower end of that 12 to 25% range, along with widespread single digits and low teen RHs across the deserts and higher mountain locations of Southern California. There will also be areas of fair to poor recoveries, mainly in the mid and higher elevations and the thermal belt-prone areas, with the lower elevations still seeing pretty good recoveries overall. And in terms of the winds, overall they'll be pretty typical the next several days with a steady onshore flow pattern in place. There will be frequent enhanced breeziness in the afternoons and evenings, especially across the wind-prone ridges and desert passes, but overall local and terrain effects will be dominant. One thing to watch is that there could be some enhanced northwest to north winds from Santa Barbara County to the I-5 corridor this weekend, especially Sunday, so we'll keep an eye on that, although it does not look like a major event. The warm and dry conditions will cause the dead fuel moistures to gradually decrease through early next week. 1 and 10-hour fuels will become much more receptive in most areas, but it will take more time for heavier dead fuel classes to recover from the recent cool and moist conditions. Here's the 100-hour observed and forecast chart for South Ops as a whole. You can see the unseasonably cool and moist conditions of late reflected in the observed data, but also the trend towards drier conditions in the days ahead in the forecast. So tying it all into fire potential, first of all, as we saw, a couple of new lightning ignitions will be possible across the northernmost portions of our area today, and there may have even been a couple last night. Otherwise, after this long recent stretch of unseasonably cool weather and well below normal fire danger, conditions will trend towards more typical summer levels in the coming days. With heavier fuel still recovering and with a lack of either lightning or extreme heat, fire potential will still run below normal the next several days, but it's going to be trending upwards. A large fire will be more possible on any day, particularly on well-aligned starts, especially by later this week with more drying. An initial attack activity, which has been unusually light of late, will likely trend more towards moderate levels over the next several days with the warmer and drier weather. So while we're not going to be flipping a switch to a much more active fire pattern, it's at least going to start feeling more like fire season again. That's it for today's webcast. Thanks for joining us. The next one will be on Thursday, July 31st.